Hello and welcome to this episode of Morgan Latif Spotlight Sessions. My name's Megan and I'm one of the senior consultants here at Morgan Latif, responsible across North America for vision care and hearing care. I am honoured to be joined by Jack Simmons today, who is the president of the medical devices business at Corza Medical. In this episode, Jack will be sharing some insights into his really impressive career journey following his early days at Cardinal Health through to leading Corza through this rapid growth and innovation. We'll also be diving into the story behind Corza and how they came to be, particularly within the ophthalmology space, as well as other areas that they're involved in. We'll also be diving into their unique approach to customer intimacy and leadership strategies, as well as talking through Jack's career development through the experience that he's had. It's a really insightful conversation, Pat, with some really valuable takeaways. So I'm really hoping you enjoy it. Hey, Jack. Hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for joining me today for the next Spotlight Session episode here at Morgan Latif.
Happy to do it, and thanks so much for having me. For those in the audience, I haven't met Jack Simmons. I am the president for the medical devices business within Corza Medical. That's predominantly made up of two businesses, our wound closure business and then our ophthalmology business. And Corza's, I hope the listeners get a chance to learn a little bit about Corza, what we're doing here, building a great high-performing organization, and some of the leadership principles we've applied as we think about attracting, retaining, and developing great talent here. So I joined Corza through acquisition. That acquisition came with Katena Products, Inc., and had predominantly spent about 12, 13 years of my career in the medical device space at Cardinal Health. Started out in finance operations for about a year. I was doing the bombs and routers and all the financial profitability stuff, was so good at it. Eventually moved into commercial and spent time in the field doing strategic work, and then ultimately different portions of our product and services businesses before joining Katena Products, Inc. And when I joined Katena, had the chance to revamp the commercial organization, sales, marketing, our global distributor footprint, moved to a direct selling force. It was a great learning opportunity as you step into the private equity space and run really, really fast. And so I've had a blast at Corza, and happy to share a little bit more about who Corza is and how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know they've not been around that long, but obviously already a huge name in the industry, not just in ophthalmology, but across all the sectors they're involved with. I mean, what is the origin of the company? Like, how did it come to be, and kind of how has it kind of evolved over the
Yeah,
last few years?
absolutely. It's a really fun story, and in a lot of ways, it's the capstone of an amazing career of an individual named Greg Lucier, who is, one of the largest, well-known players in the life science and medical device spaces. So Corza came together through a joint venture with really one of the terrific blue blood private equity firms in the United States called GTCR and Greg Lucier. They ultimately had this idea that there's a market need out there where you've got great entrenched large monopoly or duopoly competitors who fundamentally have lost their way in some ways in terms of intimacy with the customer via things like strong customer service, product availability and supply continuity, product innovation, and frankly, just how you show up in the simplest format every single day. And so we found voids in that market. We looked at different spaces to get in. Corza came together in February 2021 through the combination of Tacasil, a biosurgery product out of Takeda for advanced bleeding and surgery, and then the surgical specialties wound closure business, merged those together to build the umbrella that is Corza. And then fast forward about a year later, brought over the Katena business to reverse integrate and stand up an ophthalmic business unit within Corza, which I ultimately ended up leading and now lead the medical devices space. And so what's been so fun about Corza is the speed at which we execute, the intimacy and the differentiation we want to have from a customer service and interaction perspective, digital capabilities. But beyond that, it's really fun to go out there and try and take share against large players who we believe have in some ways missed the boat in terms of what customers are ultimately looking for with advanced service and product innovation.
Amazing. And so how big is Corza now in terms of people? It's obviously a global
Nearly 3,000
organization by
people.
now.
Yeah, nearly 3,000 people, just over $500 million in revenue, growing high single digits, low double digits every single year. It's really a great story around when, great thought leaders like Greg and great capital partners like GTCR can come together and
Mhm.
find new opportunities to drive a lot of value for the ecosystem.
That's all in 4 years.
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, amazing. And how do you think, specifically looking at ophthalmology, which I know where you started out, how do you think that it's really carved out its position in the ophthalmology industry? And what kind of role do they play in the space?
Yeah, I'll tell you an interesting story. So when we came together as part of the ophthalmology business unit within Corza, we actually had a real philosophical debate around the legacy name that was Katena, which was deeply entrenched. And should we take on this young, hungry identity that was Corza? And a big philosophical debate around what was the right approach. We ultimately landed on utilizing the Corza name, and I'll tell you why. One, um, it was something new to interact with our customers about. We got to really create our own brand story at a company level, which is a rare opportunity to do. Two, the challenge Catena always had was that while the reusable instrumentation business was a significant portion of its business, there were great other legacy brands like Blink Medical, like our biologics line, etc. And every time we commercially said Catena, all customers heard was reusable instrumentation. And so our ability and our wants ultimately to describe and display ourselves as more than just a reusable instrumentation company was really emboldened by the fact that we could use Corza as this overarching umbrella to describe all the great history and legacy. And we obviously still want to pay homage to those things. We do every single day. You'll see our product brands loud and proud wherever we show up. But it all comes together with this great service aspect that is, anchored within Corza Medical.
Yeah, I guess Catena is one of those proper like legacy brands, isn't it? That's really well known in the space. And I think what the company's done and the speed that they've done it at is obviously very commendable. But I think looking at it from a kind of private equity perspective as well, like what do you think makes their private equity model so unique compared to other businesses that might have tried to do this before?
Yeah, I think truthfully, in a lot of ways, there's a misconception around what private equity actually is and how it impacts
Mm.
the business. Most people think about it, ultimately in terms of a little bit of the, KKR barbarians at the gate story, which really isn't fair to what the broader industry is. These are great financial partners that have certain horizons in their investments period. And what it actually affords you to do is have clarity of purpose as a leadership organization. And so, when you're thinking about the critical things to be done, the speed at which you need to execute them, the team that you need to develop, it really gives you a crystal clear paradigm for how you select the right strategies, deploy the right people, and then get the heck out of their way and make sure they're highly effective. And it informs the leadership strategies we ultimately deploy at Corza Medical.
Hmm. And diving into that bit a bit about the talent side, obviously the way the capital is deployed is obviously a huge part of it. But what does it really take to scale efficiently while kind of attracting and then retaining that top level of talent?
Yeah, and as I look at attracting, retaining, and developing talent, I think there's a couple things that are really unique. Number one, the fun part about the space that we're in is that there's very clear chapters in a story for the book, right? So you get to move through and know that you have a certain investment horizon, and then you get to move to the recapitalization, new investment horizon, where I've been in large publicly traded companies, no knock on them, but every year feels kind of like the same mission. There's not the same chapter aspect of the book. So it's a great thing to be able to share with people as you're trying to bring in talent, that they're going to get this experience that they haven't historically had. As I look to bring in talent personally, the number one thing I look for is people that have operator mindsets. So there's a few different ways around which you can do that. One is diversification in their resume. So have they taken on multiple functional responsibilities as they've lived in their organizations and current roles? That shows that they're like, get things done, I will figure it out people. You need operators, people who are going to find challenges, find opportunity, find the word we use a lot at Corza, drag on the business and professionalize it, build the right operating mechanics and execute. So that's one. I think the second thing is coachability. what I ultimately look for is finding people that will take feedback, will pivot where necessary, they execute with speed. I personally love being coached by peers and by mentors, by leaders like Greg himself. It's the most important capability because at the speed you're interacting with people, you got to take feedback quickly, reorient yourself, pivot, and continue to move. And so finding ways to tease out coachability, things like you come out of an interview process with a candidate, you schedule a recap afterwards and you say, hey, let me give you a little feedback around the interview. Let's regroup in a couple days and see how that person responds. Those are great ways to see, hey, does that individual actually have the ability to listen, learn, not take things too personally, and then ultimately deploy a little bit of their own mindset, after the coaching to the next interaction.
Mhm. Amazing. And I guess that kind of leads me on to discussing a bit around kind of like, look, not just the leadership playbook, but kind of your journey into the business and kind of how you like to lead. So focusing on just Corza at the moment, what would you say is kind of your leadership style, and how have you kind of used that to develop the teams that you've got further?
Yeah, if I could phrase it in one way, and I think my team would say this, I hope. I really
Mhm.
fundamentally believe in high autonomy and high accountability. So I
Mhm.
want to get an aligned strategy. I want to have a continuous feedback loop around how my teams are executing against that strategy, but I want them ultimately to be accountable to deliver the results in and of themselves on their own. And I want them to have the freedom to operate with the right operating mechanics to make sure we don't get out of whack. But I think it allows you to attract better talent. It allows people to self-learn. It allows ultimately for the organization to, slowly rise in capabilities at a principal level. And, because of that, the most critical aspect is how do you create the right risk profile on where you give that autonomy, number one, and then two, how do you have the right operating mechanics to ensure that you've got regular check-ins so you can course correct as necessary. So you're
Mm.
ultimately not playing the steering wheel per se, but you are a little bit of a rudder just to make sure that things don't get too out of whack as you continue to deploy your team.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I guess what's really interesting as well, you've obviously come from quite a few big organizations, particularly like Cardinal Health is a huge organization. Like how did you where did you build these leadership skills from? I mean, did we put through a program, or is it something that you just kind of learned along the way?
Yeah. So a few different things. One, I mean, we're all, an amalgamation of our own experiences. So that's one piece. I had a history in athletics at certain levels, and so learning how to be coached, real-time feedback, to think about your role within a broader team. I was fortunate enough to be around great leaders that taught people how to do that and to be self-empowered. You apply those to the business world. Cardinal was a wonderful organization in terms of your ability to grow as a young professional who's ultimately trying to learn the right skill sets, have the right operating disciplines, look at certain leaders, other people's mistakes as well, and nobody's flawless. So I've had, great mentorships. I think of Greg himself. There's a lot of times where I get to use his experiential knowledge over 30 plus years to say, hey, Greg, this challenge is happening today. Help me think through it based on your experience set, et cetera. And so you got to use all those data points to come up with your own narrative. You got to be true to yourself at the end of the day in terms of what makes sense, because authenticity is ultimately really easy to spot amongst a team. But the more you can take, critical inputs and then put it in your own machine and decide how to deploy it to your team, the better you'll show up every single day.
Fantastic. And I guess like how did you also kind of find, not just from a leadership perspective, but the way the company operates, like how did you find the transition from companies like Cardinal Health into Corza?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I think you have to do your own self-assessment that you are of the type of makeup that likes the ability to be, when you're an executive leader in a space like we're in at Corza Medical, there's times to fly at 30,000 feet, and then there's times to be at the 1 inch level. For certain leaders, as you evolve in your career and infrastructure is around you, where you've got teams of people that make your PowerPoint presentation, teams of people where you've got, black belts, process improvement people, et cetera, that you can kind of throw at challenges. you start to get used to not having to do that anymore. And I'm not knocking on those people. It's just the way their career evolved. And in our world, you have to be somebody who won't get altitude sickness from going 30,000 feet to 2 feet, to 30,000 feet and everywhere in between as necessary. Now, I've loved that work. I've also, in my own learnings, had to figure out when to stop going to 2 feet and allow the team to execute. And so it's always a balancing impact. But I think part of your own, personal assessment is, do you enjoy that type of work and the speed and durability and flexibility required to operate in that way?
And I guess just a big, broad question is why did you choose Corza? What was it about the company or the role that was an offer that kind of drove you to make that decision?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One is we had talked about earlier, the ability to reorient around a brand and a brand story that was really young. Again, you don't get a lot of chances to do that in your career. I love that type of work. I love the human element of the way brands impact people. So that was super exciting. Two, I would challenge any other company in our space to find a better leadership team that collaborates, that challenges each other respectfully. We'll have tough conversations when necessary. We'll also drop everything to support one another. So I loved the culture Corza had ultimately built, and that's why when you're trying to execute at the speed that we're trying to execute, which I'm an ill if I'm still person by nature. When you've got, the right true north from a vision perspective, you've got the right culture to support you. Running really, really hard and really fast doesn't feel like work. It gives you an internal combustion to drive you and your team collectively. And so I think if you asked any of the leaders here, that those would be the predominant reasons of why Corza.
Amazing. And I actually would, in a moment, would actually be really keen to just kind of close off with any advice that you would give to anybody watching this. I'm sure people might be watching and think this is an amazing career journey and they might be looking to go into private equity or make these kind of decisions. But before we go into that, is there anything else that you wanted to kind of share about the company or about yourself that would be really helpful for anyone watching to know?
No, I would maybe just close on the Corza story to say, um, how fortunate we are to play in the space we're in, to be able to create, differentiation amongst our competitors, to compete with great competitors. It's an honor to do those things, and a challenge we look forward to every single day and wake up, using the same phrase I just used, having a lot of internal combustion about. And look, a company is ultimately has a mission, has a vision, but it's nothing without the people that we have. And we have really darn good people here at Corza, which is what makes it so fun.
Amazing. And then, yeah, any advice that you would give to anyone watching this?
Yeah, that one, Megan, is a good question. I'm always reticent to give advice to people who don't know me. But I will say this. I think, one of the things is I've been fortunate enough to work with people and develop talent over the course of time, is remember that promotion, isn't always through title or compensation. It's through experience predominantly. And so as you're working through your own career, whether you're on the front end or you're, nearing the latter stages, continue to find experiential promotion. The rest of the stuff, I promise you, it may sound like, corporate HR BS, but it's the truth. It will take care of itself. I took a number of laterals in my career to get new experiences. I love seeing that from people. In some ways, it's a bet on yourself, an investment in yourself. And so finding ways for experiential investments will take care of all the other aspects of your personal and professional life.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Jack. I think that's all we have time for, but I really appreciate you making some time today, and hopefully this was beneficial for you as well.
I loved it. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Jack.